All right, guys, let's get this started. Everybody, welcome to the webinar here today. This is part of another Fortress Power webinar hosted by yours truly. My name is Alex Lepore. I'm the Regional Southwest Sales Manager here at Fortress Power. We have a very exciting webinar today with a very popular host that goes by the name of Scott Hunt. A few notes before we jump into the webinar here today. We will be sending out these slides and recording of this webinar. So don't feel like you have to feverishly jot down notes throughout this presentation, as we will have not only a recording of this, but also the actual slideshow for your convenience sent out maybe a day or two after we conclude this presentation. There is a questions tab on your panel. If you have questions throughout the webinar, please put them in there and we will have someone address these questions either during the presentation or we will do them at the end between Scott and I. So with that being said, and for the sake of time, let's get this started. So here's what we're going to be going through today, everybody. We're going to be going through the company introductions, a little bit more on who Scott Hunt is and what Practical Preppers does, along with who Fortress Power is and what we do here at Fortress. We'll go through some of the different market trends that we're seeing with energy storage systems, talking about two of our products we have here at Fortress, our eFlex and our eVault Max, some of the cool features of both of these products and where they can make a good fit for your home or a business. We're going to go through some case studies, see where we've not only done installations with Fortress and really pick Scott's brain on all these projects he's done over the years and what he's seen as well. And then, like I mentioned, we will do that Q&A at the end for 10-15 minutes at the end of the presentation. I will reiterate, please put some questions in the question tab so we can get them addressed at the end of the presentation here today. So with that said, today we're lucky enough to host this presentation with Scott Hunt of Practical Preppers. So he's the founder and owner of Practical Preppers, and Practical Preppers, from my understanding, provides solar and water designs, materials, and installations for all sorts of different renewable energy projects. If you haven't followed him on LinkedIn, I follow him, and he posts all sorts of neat stuff, not only with Fortress Energy Storage batteries, but it could be with air conditioning projects or water pump projects and everything in between. So I highly recommend to follow him on LinkedIn if you get a minute, because he puts a lot of really good content on there, and also pass along his YouTube channel as you see on the bottom here. Now, Scott's experience, he has a master's in mechanical engineering and over 20 years engineering experience in the renewable and some even in the non-renewable spaces. So he is not only a Fortress authorized dealer, but he's also a Fortress authorized system designer and installer. So he is your go-to guy for designing your home energy storage system, along with getting that home energy storage system installed, getting it through the proper permitting, X, Y, and Z. If you hadn't heard of it, he wrote a very informative book, The Complete Guide to Disaster Preparedness. He's the sole author of that. And most of you are probably familiar with his YouTube channel, Engineer775, where he has over 280,000 subscribers. This YouTube channel has useful tips and tricks when it comes to solar installations, energy storage installations, and everything in between. So I follow him on LinkedIn personally. It's a very good resource for me, even being in the battery space. I will highly recommend you do the same. I'm sure someone can put his links to his social media followings in the questions tab so we all can have them moving forward. And a little bit about who we are here at Fortress Power. So like I mentioned, my name is Alex Lepore. I'm the regional sales manager here. We are a battery provider providing lithium iron phosphate batteries for residential and commercial applications. The reason why we chose lithium iron phosphate in comparison to like a lead acid or a nickel manganese cobalt chemistry is that the lithium, and I think Scott will attest to this, is a heck of a lot safer and longer lasting. I think when we go through some of these case studies, the proof is really going to be in the pudding when we take a look at some of the projects and the longevity of these projects with lithium phosphate chemistry. We are headquartered right outside of Philadelphia in a small town called Southampton, Pennsylvania. It's around, I'd say, 35 minutes northwest of the city of Philadelphia. We were founded way back in 2016. We're owned by a group of investment bankers and solar veterans. As you guys can see here on the right-hand side, this is our facility. It's a 30,000 square foot facility. This is our headquarters. This is where we do our research and development, sales, and logistics. Being around for the past 5 years, we've seen all sorts of different installations in the continental US, but also in Canada, the Central Caribbean, South America, Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. We are the key lithium battery supplier for SEPTA, which is a local railway company based outside of Philadelphia here. If you're a native to Philadelphia, you're very familiar with what SEPTA is, or who they are, let me say. Hydro-Quebec, which is a Canadian utility company, and the Navajo Reservation out west in the Midwest. So we have our fair share of experience here at Fortress Power, and we provide lithium iron phosphate batteries for homes and businesses. So with that said, there's a lot of different ways that you can use your battery. You can use your battery in a time of use example. Scott has a very good example later in the slideshow talking about time of use. Essentially, discharging your battery during peak times to save money on your electric bill. You can certainly use them in an emergency power application or even in an off-grid application, as well as using it if you want to basically reduce your demand charges, although that's typically for commercial or business applications. So a battery has evolved much more from just a backup system. And when we go through some of these case studies, you'll see some time of use applications, you'll see some off-grid applications, and certainly the classic emergency power application for when the grid goes down. Now, there's a lot of buzz going on with lithium batteries right now with the growth of solar. And per a recent Department of Energy analysis, by 2030, stationary deployments are going to exceed 150 gigawatt hours. So folks, if you look over here on the right-hand side, grid related is really where Fortress Power, for example, would be, that would be our niche. This is batteries that are used in homes and businesses that may or may not be connected to the grid. And you see here by 2030, from even 2021, we're going to see exponential growth with batteries in the next 9 years by the end of this decade. There's going to be a 27% annual growth for grid-related storage applications, as you can see here, and the largest market for this is going to be North America. Now, you may be asking yourself, well, why are we seeing all this growth with batteries? What is really pushing this along? Why does this matter to me? What does this mean for me, essentially? If I'm sitting at home and Alex is talking with me, why is this? It comes down to, I think, three main factors. The first thing is the battery affordability, the actual cost of the battery. So for those of you that have followed solar, the cost of solar has fallen over 20% in the past 5 years. So as that trend kind of continues on with energy storage, we're expecting that price of energy storage to go down just like solar did over the past 10 or 15 years. And furthermore, by 2029, we're going to see a 46% price reduction in lithium battery cells. Now, this certainly does not mean wait another 9 years before you get a backup system for your home, because you'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So I think the key thing here is that this growth of batteries is partly due to the affordability. You can get the maximum bang for your buck nowadays with a lithium battery, depending on how you use it. Next, we're going to talk about some of the different incentives for energy storage. And the first thing that comes to mind is the federal ITC tax credit, which was extended into this year, which is 26% when you're adding your energy storage onto a solar system. Now, this does not apply if you just have a battery without solar. You need to make sure that the energy storage is installed with solar, and you get 26% off the bat paid for by the government for this ITC tax credit. For more information, I'd recommend getting in touch with your accountant or a tax expert, and they can walk you through the processes to take advantage of this 26% federal ITC tax credit. Depending on where you're located, there are a lot of different statewide incentives. A few that come to mind is the S-chip incentive for my Californians out there, the GMP incentive for those based here in the Northeast, like in Vermont and Massachusetts, as well as other statewide rebate programs, which will give rebates for solar and potentially energy storage. States like Colorado, I know Texas is looking at one. Florida, I also know, is considering one. So depending on where you're located, and if you are interested in a solar and energy storage system for your home, save as much as you can. Get signed up for the federal ITC tax credit and any other statewide incentives that you may be eligible for. And the last thing here is we have this shifting mindset of energy storage, therefore pushing it to be very popular. The first thing is fear, bluntly. If we look at this report from the National Oceanic Atmospheric Association, NOAA, they projected some new numbers on the average, quote unquote, Atlantic hurricane season. So you see here from 1981 to 2010, it was 12 named storms, 6 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes. We can see here the new forecast is 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes. Now, I don't need to preach on bad weather because up here in the Northeast, we just got a whole bunch of flooding. If you were in Texas in the past few months, you had that snowstorm. Out west, you have these wildfires. It's kind of crazy. So having a solution to back up your home in the event of an outage, whether it be a hurricane, a winter storm, a wildfire, I don't know, an earthquake. I'm not sure how many more natural disasters I can list. However, fear is really this thing that I think is really making people consider a clean, reliable energy storage system for their home or business. We now have this higher emphasis on renewables. We're seeing the effects of climate change taking place already with flooding and all these storms and things like that. And with the recent political administration change, that is certainly pushing for a cleaner approach to it's a not even local generation, but distributed generation across the US. So if someone asks you why are batteries becoming so popular, it's the affordability of the batteries, incentives tacked along with that affordability, and the need for a battery, the need for power is higher than it's ever been. It's a safe, tangible investment that can be used over and over again. Fortress Power has a 10-year warranty on our systems, and even at that, some of our batteries are projected to go 12 to 15 years, depending on how you use them. So this really isn't just a if question anymore, it's a matter of a when question. When will you get a backup system? When are you going to avoid high utility costs, X, Y, and Z? Now we do have our 2 products which are perfectly fit for all those applications I mentioned earlier, whether it's an off-grid application, you want to move yourself completely off the grid, or you want to have a battery for an emergency application when that next big storm hits, or maybe you're paying through the nose during peak times. Getting a battery and discharging that battery during peak times is certainly a very viable option for a more comprehensive return on investment. So over here on the left, we have our newest eVault Max. The eVault Max is around the size of a, let's say, college refrigerator, about yay high, it's slim, and it's scalable up to 370 kilowatt hours. So the 18.5 number is the nameplate capacity of the battery, 18.5 kilowatt hours, and you can put 20 of these batteries in parallel to get to 370 kilowatt hours. Now, for those of you that are thinking, Alex, I don't need 20 batteries, fair enough. But you can certainly do 2, 3, or 4 of these batteries for a whole home backup in the event of an outage. You'll see it has this local monitoring LCD display. So you can physically see right on your battery after Scott leaves your house, you can see the voltage of your battery, the current output of your battery in amps, what your state of charge is at on your battery, along with the power in kW. For those of you in California, it's the largest single unit that's approved with SCHIP at 17.7 kilowatt hours AC, meaning you really are getting the most bang for your buck with something like the eVault Max when you break down the dollars per kilowatt hours. And for my folks not in California, look at some of those statewide rebates like I mentioned. It can make the let's see, the price tag of a battery a little bit more manageable than if you weren't using a rebate or something like the ITC tax credit. Now, because of its larger size, it's going to be very easy to install and get into your home or your business. And if you see here, this aluminum casing, this casing is aluminum, excuse me, so it's going to look really nice and clean in or near your home. And it kind of brings me back to my original point. We use lithium iron phosphate, which is proven to be the safest chemistry, lithium chemistry on the market, since this battery, like I mentioned, will be installed near or around your home. Now on the right-hand side, we have our eFlex 5.4. This is one of our newest products. It's a more modular solution, just in case you don't need something as large as the eVault 18.5 Max. The key difference between the eFlex and the eVault is not only the size, 5.4 kilowatt hours versus 18.5 kilowatt hours, but the enclosure on the eFlex is an IP65 aluminum enclosure, meaning that this unit is outdoor rated. So for those of you that are not in the Northeast where you have basements or large garages, you can install this battery outside. This unit is scalable up to 80 kilowatt hours, and it's a little corny, but it makes for a very flexible install since you can install it on the floor, on the wall, or even into a shelf racked or a racking system. I have some case studies here in the next 4 slides or so, showing each of the different applications with our eFlex. It has closed loop communication, meaning that the battery management system in the battery will communicate with the inverter that you're using. The same thing here with the eVault Max here on the left-hand side. This also has the closed loop communication from the battery BMS to the inverter system. Now, I'm going to try and zoom in here. Ooh, nice. We try and zoom in here. You see this ribbing on the top of the eFlex here? It's a integrated heatsink, which is going to allow for 5 times better thermal performance, meaning that in terms of overheating or let's say in cold environments, you're going to have much better thermal performance dealing with colder or hotter temperatures because of this integrated heatsink. This is what this ribbing is here on the top. So the key thing here, folks, is that depending on your project, depending on how much room you have in or near your home, the eFlex or eVault Max are both viable options, but have their own respective pros and cons. For example, the eVault Max is around 500 pounds, so that's a fairly large battery. The eFlex, it's a smaller, more modular battery, which is a little bit more flexible if you want to add on 5.4 kilowatt hour increments. So at the moment, getting in touch with Scott, talking with him about, do I want to go with the Max? Do I like the approach of the eFlex for a smaller, more, let's say, chewable battery? Or do I want the whole home, kit and caboodle with the eVault Max? It's certainly up to your discretion on what you want for your home project. Now, with that said, let's jump into a few different case studies of where we've seen Fortress being used. So as you can see here, this is a North Carolina installation. They have the eVault with the Solarc inverter. And this is for a grid tied for backup based in North Carolina. Now you see here, the cool thing I like about this one is that they have an EV charger. So this whole system is kind of what I envision for the future of energy, to which you have solar on the roof, a comprehensive hybrid inverter with a large battery bank, and an EV charger. So everything you're producing, generating, and then delivering is all local. And if the grid does go out because of a major weather phenomena, you do have backup for all the loads in your home. So this one's really neat. One other thing I like to point out on this, if you see over here, it comes on wheels on the side. So there's no lifting or picking it up or everything. You're just going to wheel it onto site, or have Scott wheel it onto site, let's say. And then it's very easy for maintenance because it's just one plug, one wire going up into the terminals on the Solarc inverter. So this is with the Solarc 8K and the eVault 18.5. If you'd zoom in here, you'd see that LCD display is flashed up in lighting, and they have the addition of this EV charger here. This is like a fully comprehensive system. Now, if we keep going, I mentioned that the eFlex is a more flexible option. So on this, we have an Outback inverter, looks like a Radiant inverter, with 4 of our eFlex 5.4s in a backup application. Now, the thing here, and I mentioned you can put this on the floor or in a server rack or on the wall. This is how you would set up your server rack if you chose to go with 4 of the eFlexes versus 1 eVault. Now, you might be wondering, well, Alex, why would I fill up a cabinet with 4 eFlexes versus 1 eVault Max? It's a great question. Maybe down the road you want to expand your system more modularly, so you get another rack and you put 3 eFlexes per rack to get you around 30 kilowatt hours of total capacity. So it's a little bit more flexible for sizing, but also you can be pretty creative with what kind of cabinet you want to put the eFlex in, although we do have a cabinet solution here at Fortress that you could consider for your project. So this one's 21.6 kilowatt hours, tied in with an Outback inverter for backup power. So this may be used where the power goes off in this facility. Not sure where this was located. The Outback would signal to the battery to flip on in the event of an outage, and then the energy storage system, the eFlexes, would then deliver that power to the loads in your home, whatever you so choose: refrigerator, lights, modem, etc., etc. And I believe this is the last one we have for you here, is the solar converter. We have 4 of the E-flexes in parallel for backup power, just like the last one. But you see how they wall mounted it. So I like this installation a lot because maybe you don't have room on a wall somewhere where you can put a flex rack or you can put an eVault Max. So you can put 4 of them on the wall, very clean, very much so out of the way, for example, in a garage, and then you would hook it right up with the inverter of choice. Here we have a Solarc. I believe this is a 12 kW inverter. So we have a lot of different ways to install, depending on what your home project is like. Now, that being said, I want to introduce the man, the myth, the legend, Scott, and he has a few case studies and other things he's going to pass along as well. So, Scott, I'll let you take it away from here.
All right, thanks a lot, Alex. It's great. It's been great working with you on a almost, I don't want to say a daily basis, but a weekly basis with these Fortress battery orders and just working. I was thinking about when I first met Fortress was at an Intersolar conference in California and met Jing, your CEO, and that was an awesome experience. And she ended up, we talked about testing batteries, doing YouTube videos, and so I have 2 of the eVault 18.5s that allowed me to transition from kind of moving from I was very hesitant to get into lithium because of the cost, as you mentioned. It's come way down. I said, okay, because Tesla, the name Tesla was kind of taken over and everybody wanted a Tesla when we were still in lead, flooded lead acid batteries and AGMs, and everybody wanted a Tesla. And we're like, oh, we don't, and they didn't really have their act together whether we're going to do DC coupled or AC coupled batteries. And so we just held off. And then when we went to Intersolar and said, it's time for us to get into lithium, and met Jing, and that was great. And we started to do some testing. So I made that transition. And we still do lead because of the EMP hardening. I'm seeing a lot of questions come in here, so those will be addressed later, hopefully. And we're still not able to EMP harden an lithium, an LFP battery at this point. And we can talk about replaceable BMSs. I'll put that back on you, Alex. But it's been great working with you folks. And just for folks to know, and I've been blown away by the tech support. We do a lot, for the inverters and panels and ground mounts and batteries. And I've really enjoyed working with, I think John brought Discord into your company as a way to not have to sit on the phone, pick a number, and I get a number. I'm not picking on Outback, but I get a case study, get a case number, and then maybe they'll get back to you in 3 days. I can Discord John on my phone, on a laptop, and I'm getting a hold of somebody at Fortress. Tickets are generated, and I'm real time. I know that's not part of our talk here today, but I just wanted to say that if you're in trouble or you need some help with the battery or installation or updating firmware, that was an amazing platform. I can send pictures, videos, talk. He bailed me out. I was 26 feet underground putting a battery in had a problem with a battery, needed a firmware update, and he was able to help me through that in an underground off-grid bunker installation. So it's been great working with Fortress. So I will say that. So I guess I'm going to jump into my case studies, and the first one is going to be kind of alluded to. That is how I transitioned from lead to lithium. Again, I still have a lead acid forklift battery that I maintain and put distilled water in, and it gases off, and it needs vent fans and relays, and all of these things are not required on an LFP battery, which is like, at first I had to, my first Fortress installation was like, are you kidding me? That is so easy compared to what we've been doing for years. And bringing this giant lead battery, 24 2-volt cells, putting battery, watering kits on them, venting them, make sure the charge controller turns the relay on, that turns your fan on, and not having it in a place that is going to, be in a home, make sure it's vented very well. So that was one of the first things, transitioning from lead to lithium, just how, like, this is too easy. This is like too easy of an installation. So I rolled these 2 eVaults in, and this pictures of kind of my lab where I experiment with my Outback Radiant. I have Solarcs and Outbacks, and I have lead and I have lithium, and so we just constantly go back and forth. So and just in testing things. And so I've been amazed at the ease of installation. Probably was the biggie. As you said, even though it's a heavy battery, I rolled it in on casters, hooked it up. because it's one battery of 18.5 kilowatts, I have home runs. I land on the positive and negative. It's got a built-in 250 amp breaker, everything that you kind of need for a proper installation. So the eVault is too easy. It might be a little bit pricier, and it is, but there's a lot of things that you're not using bus bars and cabling and racks, and it's just all in one. So, and it saves a lot of space too. You can roll it into places, people put them up in closets and things that you could not do in the lead acid world or even the AGM world. So, and then performance. So if I run loads and testing out things, I can run HVAC equipment and pumps and things. I'm getting better performance. It's just the response time. Even though lead acid is a workhorse, the lithium performs better, it's faster. I can run more with these batteries. Trying to compare amps to amps and amp hours to amp hours as closely as I can. I'm still getting better performance out of the lithium. Not only that, being able to discharge this battery. I got some applications where customers, they don't understand electricity, their usage, and they beat their batteries to death. And I can't get away with that with lead. As you know, it's like, don't ever go over below 50% discharge, you're going to destroy your battery. And I've had some of these, I've taken an eVault not willingly down to 1% and been able to bring it back. It's just customers are not understanding how much power they're actually using. But their quick recovery, the fast charge times, I can go on and on about it, but the performance improvement between lead and lithium is a no-brainer. I was kind of late to the game. I was kept watching, talking to other installers. Everybody jumped into lithium, and I was like, I don't know if we're ready for it. But Fortress was our first step into LFP chemistry, and it's been fantastic. I'm glad we went with Fortress on that. So deep discharge, ease of installation, performance. I mean, if you've ever installed a 2,500 pound, 3,000, 4,000 pound lead acid battery and had to maintain it. Like I just filled up my battery the other day and I had to equalize it. Well, it was too full, and bring out so no, I don't have baking soda on my truck now to try to neutralize all the overspill, or people overfill their batteries and it's all over and it's ruining their floors. And so there's some things you see from an installation standpoint with a unmaintained or a poorly maintained lead acid battery. That's kind of like, you leave it, it looks awesome, it's working great. You come back in a year or 2 years and it's a disaster. The batteries are bulging, they haven't been filled with water. So it doesn't take long. Like you said before, Alex, a lead battery can last, a flooded can last a long time if it's taken care of. I know guys that have batteries that are 20 years old, but they babysit them, and most customers do not do that unless they're just geared towards that, and they destroy their battery. Where the lithium has, between your BMS and its chemistry and the inverter working with the battery, there's a lot of protection that they don't even know, that all the balancing of the cells, the charging, the power in, the power out being managed really saves that investment. And where people get very upset when they're like, I spent $6,000 on that lead battery and now I have to replace it in 5 years, 4, 5, 6 years. And with the lithium, with the 8,000, 10,000 cycles, hopefully 16 plus years, 17 years, we don't have that. So it's great. So all right, I guess that's on the lead versus lithium. Making that transition has been fun. It's easier, the installations are faster, and there's really no reason to go lead other than EMP hardening, which is a niche in our market, working with Solarc and their EMP hardened inverters. And we've talked to Fortress, we've talked to you folks about possible field replaceable BMSs. I know one of the questions that came up, what's the difference in the Max and the Classic? And I don't know, and maybe you can answer this, Alex. Are we able to get field replaceable BMSs? I know that's kind of been talked about. It's one thing I keep saying over and over. If we could have a field replaceable BMS, then I could kind of move towards an EMP hardening. I don't know if you can say anything to that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good question, and I get it quite often. And that's the benefit, and first, of having a lithium batteries. The battery management system is really tailor-made for lithium batteries. It's not something that lead acid batteries have. So it's a new problem on what do I do with the BMS and how do I change it out if I need to. Now that's something, if you needed a field serviced battery management system, you get in touch with my technical support team, and then they would essentially, if going through the processes of, okay, what happened with your current BMS, how are you using the battery, learning more about your usage and things like that, providing it to where you can replace the BMS essentially. Now, we do have instruction on this. We don't recommend that anybody do that. There is some training we would recommend you go through, or calling someone like Scott, who's very knowledgeable, to replace a BMS just to avoid any errors. But it is something that we can do. If there is a problem, you contact your technical support team, they get more information on your project and then get you through those next steps of, okay, we're going to send you a BMS. Who's going to be doing the swap for you? If you're doing the swap, here is some training for you to get you familiar, and then take those next steps from there. It's a really good question.
Very good, very good. It is a plug and play. If you could get an extra BMS and you know how to replace a BMS if it failed in an event, then that would be one way to mitigate the EMP event. So, all right, I think we'll go on to the next slide. All right, off-grid, we do a lot of off-grid. We do hybrids. The inverters are so awesome now that they are hybrid. They're multimodal, so I can do grid tie, battery backup, net meter, time of use, off-grid, any mixture and any combination of that. And having a battery that can respond and be used in any of those modes is awesome. And we use the battery in all those modes. Sometimes on an inverter like a solar, there's 3 modes checked. We're doing grid cell, time of use, and limited power to, we can offset another panel, limited power to home. And so it's great. So here's a few pictures. Here's one of being in a bunker. It's an Atlas shelter, 26 feet underground. Getting all that equipment in there is a challenge at times. And but these are the type of applications where you can't cheat. There's no grid power. You're relying on that battery. If that battery doesn't work, you can't live. What I mean is that Swiss air blower to the left of the battery, if that isn't working, you're not breathing. So to have a robust system working, and it has to work, and it has to work well. And with a lead, you can't have a lead, you just can't vent anything in this space. So this is a safe battery. It allows you to run off grid. You do not need grid support. And we're doing more and more off grid because people are, as you mentioned, moving, they're working virtually. They just want to go off the grid. They don't want to deal with the Texas storms. They don't want to deal with the fires in California. They just want to live off grid. So it's fun starting, especially new construction, designing a system that can totally work off grid. Now, where I come from on this is minimizing the battery. I know I shouldn't be saying that because you guys are trying to sell batteries, but I try to minimize the number of batteries in a system. And I can do that more with lithium than I can with lead, because lead, you got to kind of buy a batch at the same time. You can't add a battery 6 months, or you shouldn't years later add one battery to that mix if one's died. Because of the BMSs, you can add batteries years later, same battery to that match. They're kind of independently adjusting according to their life, and the cells are being balanced individually. So I start small, and a lot of times I have to start small. It's the customer's budget. They can't afford to buy 4 eVolt maxes. They're expensive, but they can start with one, get the system up and running, and then they realize as they build their house, as they build their business, and they add more loads, they can add another battery. So it makes all the systems scalable, where before a system wasn't as scalable as it is now with LFP. You can scale, but I do start really small, and people are like, you need more battery. I know people are like, I can't afford the battery. And so I have several systems out there, don't tell anybody, Alex, but that are 1 E-Flex. That is not real on a Solar 12K. That's not a good balance, but that's what they could afford. But what did it do for them? Well, they have water. They're off grid. They've got water pumping. Everything's kind of limited, but we program the inverter so it's not beating up that E-Flex battery, and it works just fine in that. And now they're going to add a battery next year when they can afford it. So the scalability of the Fortress batteries, the LFP chemistry, is awesome. It allows people to get into solar battery backup just because they can afford it now, and they can scale up later on. So a few times down in bunkers in the Atlas shelter. I don't know if I'm ever gonna, it's a crazy project. It's, you know, a complete house upside down. You know, you're doing things, you know, from the plumbing, everything has to work. Everything's upside down. Your septic system's got a pump, the air you got to bring down in, everything's got to be safe. You got to control your carbon dioxide level, carbon monoxide. So a lot of these they become quite a experiment in a quality of life. So there's a lot going on here. This is a contained environment, and to be able to have a battery that works in that environment is pretty awesome. So single cabinet, obviously, we let this thing down in, you know, it's 400 pounds, so we brought it down in with a crane because we had to lean out hundreds of feet and then bring it down with a crane down into a shaft. And but it's been awesome. Both of them that I've done have worked great in that. So, and then we do a lot of just off-grid installs. Somebody builds a cabin in the middle of nowhere. It costs $50,000 to run power lines to that home, that cabin, that off-grid retreat. And now we can design systems that really function awesomely with, you know, we do request that they consider getting a generator in case that, you know, as a backup to their system. And the beauty of the lithium, guess it charges so fast compared to a lead acid. I can just, you know, just to watch the current dump into that, you're watching that screen, it's like, oh, 100 amps, no problem. Consistently dumping 100 plus amps into that battery. That's great. And it doesn't take a large generator to do. That's a 5 kilowatt generator. So we do a lot of like 10K, 11K, 12K generators, and that works good for charging a system like that. So off-grid, we are everywhere putting in off-grid systems from Michigan to Arkansas. We're having to, I've got to be careful what I say. We have so much work now closer to home, thankfully, but we have gone in a lot of places. And now we're transitioning to helping folks. We design the system, we incorporate these, you know, the Fortress batteries, solar converters, solar systems, design it. And so a lot of people have questions on sizing. I think sometimes people spend too much time trying to figure out every single load and what they need when they really need something. And that's the beauty of this. I can give them a system that works and they can add to it. It's like, I know about what you need, and this is going to work. So let's work it from the other standpoint. Here's a great working system. And if you can adjust your lifestyle to live with the sunshine, you know, make hay while the sun shines, you're not beating on that battery like you think you are. You just adjust your lifestyle. You're living off grid, you're living here and working here. And there are systems that they're not even touching the battery because they do most of the heavy lifting when the sun is shining in ambient light with large solar arrays, and they're not really working that battery to death. So there's a lot that we go into in off-grid. And of course, off-grid, we spend more time focusing on the appliances, the loads. The best money spent sometimes in solar is in the loads that are being run. Do you have soft start well pumps, soft start compressors, heat pumps? What is the technology? Do not build your home in a traditional American way, is what we keep telling people, because you're just going to have to double the cost you spend on Fortress batteries, solar converters, all these panels, when you could, I'm a design engineer, so I start from a design. Everything, if the design is wrong, everything else falls apart. Financially, everything's not right in my mind if the system doesn't, if it doesn't make sense. It's just a mathematical problem. I got this much amp hours, this many kilowatts of surge. You know, this is what this pump pulls, this is what this heat pump pulls, and it's just, can I do it? Yes. And it's becoming easier to do off-grid systems. So so here, and on the bottom, we do the E-flexes. I'm a little anal retentive, so I don't like putting the Fortress on its side where I have to read it sideways. So I put it so the Fortress is horizontal. Sorry, Alex, it's just my problem I have. So we've done 2, 4, 6. We put these batteries so that you're reading, you know, it doesn't, there's only one way you can't orient it, and that's flipped all the way over, right? You can't flip, there's one orientation where you can't flip it all the way over, where Fortress is upside down. And that's the one orientation on the wall. But we like the wall brackets. It does save a lot of space if you got wall space. And then we combine them in our wiring trough. So there is a combiner bus bar inside the wiring trough where those are parallel together. We make sure our cable lengths are the same, that they're each, and then the batteries are all connected together. And now Fortress, obviously, as Alex mentioned, the closed loop communication with Solar. So now up pops a green dialog box, and you can run that battery at a little bit higher voltage when you have closed loop communication, getting a little bit more capacity, better warranty, better life out of the battery if everything's working together. So I like both. They're two totally different looks, two totally different types of installation. Obviously same battery chemistry, and they perform the same. They really do perform the same kilowatt to kilowatt if you're matching them up. So we like it. I typically undersize. You can see two batteries in there. Alex saying no, you shouldn't do that, but you can do. I think the next slide I get into time of use maybe. Let's do next slide. Yeah, time of use. Cows are important. No, I'm just kidding. We got several farmers, off-grid farmers. This is just a dairy that we took off-grid. If you deal with time of use where rates are very high, different times of the day, different times of the year, and that was this customer. And a lot of people don't believe this, but it's true. There's a co-op I work with, and they charge $12 a kilowatt during this time of use. They charge 5 cents off of that zone. So it's really crazy. So this was so much fun. Just with 2 E-Flexes, I was able to take, and they have no power bill for the rest of their life. That was fun. These 2 folks, they were hardworking. They get dairy farmers, and anyway, long story. I've known them for a while. I said, I can do this. Let me zero your power bill, and let me minimize the battery to do it, and let's see how it goes. So they could add battery, but they haven't needed to. So they have no power bill. And during their time of use, we dump power out of these batteries to match the load that they're using in their home. And so it's just offsetting their cost perfectly. I knew it was on the edge with 2 batteries, but it's been absolutely fine. We do have closed loop communication between these batteries and the solar, and it's just awesome. I can watch it on our PowerView app and see that battery just diving during that time of use, because they're running their air conditioners, they're running everything, and they're not using any of that $12 a watt, $12 kilowatt electricity. And so time of use is great. Time of use is also great for customers that don't want to connect to their utility. So the great way to use the battery is I'm not connected to the utility. I don't have a net metering program. There's no interconnection. No, I'm not doing that. I don't want to for whatever reason. But I want to maximize the use of solar that I can produce on my property. So what we're doing is just discharging these batteries down to say 70, 80%. I warned them, I said, you don't want to be caught with a battery being low, but you have a generator. So if there's an event and the grid actually does go out, you can fire up that generator, get that battery back in condition within hours. So they're discharging every day out of this battery, cycling it down a certain amount. They're not killing it, Alex, I promise. They're staying within the specs, and they're bringing it down. And what is that doing? That's providing so much more room starting up in the morning that they can fill that battery and run their loads with their solar. So time of use settings on these multimodal inverters really allow you to use that battery forever until its life's run out. But it's a great way, and I have a lot of my customers tweaking and adjusting appliances, their lifestyle, going from, I only used 15 kilowatts today. And I'm like, yes, because you're doing things when you don't have solar and you don't have a buyback, you don't have an interconnection plan. So we move them to this time of use, and they're up to 30, they're doubling the amount of solar that they can produce, minimizing their power bill. And that's a lot of fun. When you can give somebody a project and they're doing it because they want off-grid power, they want backup power, most of them, and they get the tax credit. But when they don't have a power bill for the rest of their life, that's pretty awesome. It's very rewarding. So we can get away with 2. I've got one customer, he's still running on 1. He's limping along with 1 battery. I know he's got water for his location. So the time of use is a great. I would never do this with a lead. I would never do this with an AGM battery or a lead acid battery. Those usually stay in float as much as possible, unless you're off grid and you're having to cycle. Then I don't like AGMs. We do floodeds, so we can, take that kind of abuse. But time of use with a lithium is a new world. It's fantastic. So next slide.
I just want to say, Scott, for those that are unfamiliar with time of use rate charges, Southern California is a perfect example. So they'll charge, using Scott's example, it was 5 cents from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Once 4 p.m. comes on, they'll change the billing rate to be $12 a kW from, let's say, 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. The reason for this is that as solar gets more distributed, utility companies are losing money, especially with how net metering is nowadays. So that's why I think, in the West, that's where I cover. I see it's every single day. I see time of use, batteries being used for time of use. Now, my folks here on the East Coast, it is coming. Looking at states like Georgia, even here in my home state of Pennsylvania, there is talk of picking up a time of use charge during peak times. 9 out of 10 times, it's when you're at home, when you're using the most, so the utilities can make as much money as they can during those peak times. So just a quick little clarification on what it is, where we see it, and obviously Scott has a lot of experience with it too.
Yeah, it's great. And now we have a battery that works with it. So great. And most of our systems, I would say most, we're getting more and more off grid, but we do a lot of hybrids where they are grid connected or even grid tied and they're selling back and they want backup power. Then the battery is really, it's not it's not being used as hard. It's not being abused because I can sell power back. I'm still net metered 1-to-1. I'm grandfathered into 2025, but after that, I'm going to be back onto a generator rate, and it's not going to be as good. I'm going to be using the battery more. So as you know, net metering going away, more and more time of use coming to the East Coast, as you mentioned, it's already in the West. Then the battery is going to be used more and more. So I just started this slide. This was basically just showing just the simplicity. It's hard to, you have to watch my videos. A lot of our, just to see, this has saved so much time. It's like, where could I put the lid? I couldn't put the battery in there. I'd have to go someplace else. But this battery just slides in, hooks up, 2 little short 6-foot cables. I'm up and running, charging instantly, able to use the system that day. It's just an awesome, it's for an installer, it's great. And I do a lot of designing of mech rooms. That's the SketchUp model I use. I just have all your batteries 3D modeled now. And so I can pretty much build a 3D, a mech room really quick. And I try to design mech rooms like put all of this stuff in a mechanical room, your water, your hot water, your air HVAC, your solar system, your batteries, all in the same room. You walk in that room and you've got screens at eye height and you can go around and just check on everything. Here's my pressure's good, my temperature's good, my voltage is good. Everything is great. So we've done a lot of these. So a lot of times we'll design everything in 3D and then we'll take it, and that's how we build it when we go there. We don't get to the job and start scratching our head. Where does things go? So it's been a lot of fun building. So we've got all the Fortress stuff modeled, and it's kind of fun. We got a library of components that we can build your mech room out. So we do a lot of hybrid systems, but we're doing so many more off grid. This picture on the one on the bottom is that one is an off-grid system in Idaho, and folks moved from California to Idaho, and all of a sudden we get it's so weird. We got 6 or 7 customers in Idaho, and most of them have moved from out of California to Idaho. They're like, I'm done. I don't want to deal with this. I want to go off the grid. Can I go off the grid? Sure, you can go off the grid. Now it's going to cost some money to if you want to live at the same level of power. I got customers that have $1,300 a month electric bills, and they want to go solar. And I'm like, this is not going to go well. I mean, unless they have the budget, and it goes very well for Alex and I. But it's doable now. The technology is there. Whether you're hybrid, off-grid, time of use, it doesn't matter. And the Fortress is just sitting there working. However you program it, it works fantastic. So next slide.
Scott, you mentioned a good point. I'm sorry to keep jumping in here, but you have this ease of connection. And now, from your perspective, if you had many lead acid batteries, let's say sitting on the floor here, you'd be making connections from each lead acid battery right across. I'm going to take a zoom in here. You see right from where Scott puts this, it's bus bar, trough, gutter, combiner. There's a lot of synonyms for it, but it's a positive and a negative 4-aught cable running into that. He's landing the connections there. This is his main panel that's running into here, all connected to the solar converter. That's, I think, it came to mind because I saw it. He mentioned lead acid batteries. It's one battery here instead of many batteries on the floor, cable, 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 cable. It's like he said, I think you put it perfectly, Scott. 6-foot run right into the combiner. You're good to go. I thought that was just a really, really neat thing, honestly.
And that good point. And just it's landing right on the solar breaker. Because it's one battery on this system, I don't have to combine. It's done. Where if I did a Simplify, not picking on Simplify, I think they just got bought out by Briggs & Stratton. But anyway, Simplify, we look at that and you have this spaghetti of wires that have to be combined on bus bars to get less kilowatts than this battery. So there's a lot to be said for the cleanness of the installation. I know this is just in a barn, but we have some really nice, pretty installations that you're not having this spaghetti of parallel cables and bus bars trying to hide. And you can do that creatively with a lot of gutters, but this is so easy. The eVault. So I'm bragging on the eVault. The eFlex is just as good. It's just, depends on the application and the budget. So, all right, I think that's pretty much it on hybrid. And then I don't know if it's time to jump into some Q&A. I think there's a lot of questions. You gonna field these,
Yeah,
Alex? Or?
absolutely, absolutely. Let me scroll up here and I'll start reading some out.
And before you jump in there, can I ask a question? I mean, this is on everybody's mind. Where can you speak
Please.
at all to lead times, supply chain? We're getting so many calls. People want to buy we can't get to them, but they want to stockpile their equipment, solar panels, ground mounts, batteries, inverters. They want them in their house. They want them in hopes that we'll come get to them before the next 6 months. Availability of the product, specifically, your two batteries. What are we looking at?
It's a really good question, Scott, and I'm sure if all you guys are keeping up with the news, the ports right now for shipping are a mess. So it's something that's not only just Fortress, but it is industry wide. I can speak to what I know, and that is our eFlex is readily available. I know our eVault Max probably has a 7 to 9 week lead time at the moment. It's not a matter of getting the product in, it's getting it through customs in the port to then be delivered. So our eFlex, if you had someone who want to take advantage of 26% ITC by the year end, the eFlex would be the way to go. If you were, headstrong and going with the eVault Max, I would guess around probably 7 to 9 weeks on the more conservative side, just to account for all these delays that we're seeing, the higher volume moving up into the fourth quarter, because that's usually our busiest time of year as a battery manufacturer at the least. But it's a fair question.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's our busiest time of year, and everything's converging now more. It's just because of the tax credit. End of year, people are going to be. It always ramps up. September it takes off, and it's just the way it is. But I just thank you because it's people want their batteries, and so 7 to 9 weeks. Yikes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have a question here from a Mark Chandler. When is the eVault more appropriate than the eVault Max and vice versa? Scott, I can handle this. I think, Mark, we are phasing out the eVault Classic, as I call it, to go to the eVault Max. The eVault Max it's a UL 9540 listing. It's a certain listing that's done through a NERDL, or a national recognized testing laboratory. So typically I've been recommending the Max because it's all the certifications that are typically needed. It's more scalable in just terms of 12 eVaults versus 20 eVault Maxes. It's more scalable, and it's our latest and greatest. So we are going to be phasing it out if we haven't already, the eVault. So I would just say go with the eVault Max as our latest and greatest. Comes with the same 10-year warranty, prismatic lithium iron phosphate cells.
And then again, budget, if they can't and they want to still do a system, that eFlex gets them into a system that is scalable, right? I mean, they can still, get that. You have the eFlex. If people are like desperately needing a system, they can get your eFlexes.
Okay, let's see. Drew had a good question. Storage in cars is less than $200 per kilowatt hour at retail. Why is it $2,000 a kilowatt hour in houses? Scott, do you want to take a stab at that?
I don't know if it is $200 per kilowatt for cars. I don't know if is it that low. There are some lithiums out there. Fortress, Fortress is a premium brand. So you have people on Alibaba selling batteries for $200 for homes a kilowatt, but there's no warranty, there's no tech support. If it gets discharged too low, you're not going to get it back. And then what do? You just, so there's a lot of batteries like that. And we talk with the inverter manufacturers and say, I ask them all to, okay, what battery? Because I start with a design. It's like, what battery is working great with your inverter? and where are they with their closed loop communication, blah blah blah. And people are like buying all these, I won't name names of batteries that are out there. They're buying them like crazy, but they don't have any warranty, no tech support. And I was told by some of the inverter companies, if they're too discharged below 20% for any reason, they will not come back, and they've got to be sent back to somewhere in China to, so there are some cheap lithium comparable to your $200 a kilowatt. There are some that we've installed around the $400 kilowatt. What are you, Alex? Are you like, you more like 1,300 on the eVault Max?
I think so. I'd have to jump into the math. I don't know off the top of my head, but I could find out.
But I don't think they're 2,000, Drew. Even the best eVault Max, I think it's $14,000. You're looking at what's that? A $1,300, $1,200 to $1,300 a kilowatt. But don't leave out the ease of installation and the breakers that are built in. You get a lot of batteries out there. They have no overcurrent protection. There's a lot of cabling and combining that has to happen. A rack that has to be purchased. Any racking, if you ever buy a rack, they're not cheap. So there's costs associated, installation time, complexity, racking, cabling, bus bars that come along with this one cabinet on casters. So apples to apples, you got to, be careful there. But there are batteries. There's the whole realm from, I'd say 400. Well, no, there are the cheap batteries. You're probably down to $200 a kilowatt. So you can get a cheap lithium battery. They're out there. You can buy them. And there's people on YouTube promoting and pushing them. And they do work. It's just, I can't do that to my customer. Like, oh, your battery's dead, and you live 7 hours from me. Sorry, I have no way. What do I do? All right, so they got to move out of their house, or they got to, they'll lose all their food. I've got no way to fix that. I can't do tech support on that battery. So be careful on buying the cheapest out there. And there's people building their own, taking car batteries. There's people building their own lithiums, buying BMSs, have done amazing jobs. So if you're capable of doing that, go for it. But if you don't know what in the world we're even talking about, and you just want power for your, your virtual job, then go with something that's got tech support, backing, quality, reputation, and you're going to pay more. So I don't know if I answered the question.
Absolutely. I had another question from Drew regarding the bunker system project, Scott. How is it charged? Is that hooked up to a solar array?
Yes.
How big is that solar array?
Yeah, that's 100% solar. That was on a 24 panel seasonal adjust ground mount. That was about 400 feet away. So, you can't give away your bunker location. So you put your solar way away, like it's running your house or something, but it's really actually running the bunker. So we put the solar 1,000 feet away from the system, but it is being charged on solar, 350 to 400 volt strings coming into the solar, charging that 48 volt, 50 volt battery. So yeah, and we do have diesel generators. Diesel generators are in the gen pod on the other side of the bunker. So we can charge diesel, never put propane in a bunker, but so we have diesel not safer in a gen pod. So we have small diesel generators and solar.
Nice.
And you can hook it to the grid if you want to.
Scott, I have a good question from Paul Kingsley. It might be a good kind of case study almost. Designing and installing a 4.7 kW PV array with a solar converter. Wants a battery set up to start with, powering a construction site, which is, he puts it as a DIY or small crew that works every day, and then using this to power some of the system in the house until it's complete. And then basically says, I want to decide whether to grow the system to go off-grid if feasible. What battery do you typically suggest starting off, Scott, just based off the information we have here from Paul?
I mean, with 4.7 kilowatt and it's just, you're working, obviously, I'm thinking through this it's a construction site, you're working during the day for the most part, so you've got solar, you've got this 4.7 actually working for you. So, I mean, you could get away. I mean, if the tools need the capability of the 12K, which is 37.5 amps off grid, then you do need at least 10 kilowatts of lithium to make it work. So you'd need 2 E-flexes to make that work, or 1 eVault. 1 eVault matches up nicely with a Solarc, one eVault, but that's a lot for a construction portable So I would think you could do 2 E-flexes that'd be a good balance, 2 E-flexes with that size solar array. I hope that helps.
Perfect. A lot of questions here, folks. Bear with me.
How do you respond to a hot garage in Florida? Yeah, there's a question on heating a hot garage, dealing with it. A lot of our installations, we do add some sort of HVAC temperature control because the batteries can't be below 32 degrees. They can't get too hot. They get derated once they're over 113 degrees. I think you have a deration on the Fortress battery. Same with on the inverter too, once you get that hot. So if they're in a really hot place, they're going to be derated. So you don't want to do that. So we're adding mini splits, small window, in any inverter based HVAC, and it's infinite right now. You can get, there's hundreds of brands of HVAC equipment that will, and you don't have to run it at 60 degrees. You can run it at 85 degrees, barely pull any power, but it keeps the humidity out of the space. It keeps just operating that inverter in the 70 degree, 80 degree range is perfect, good for the battery. So we add a lot of HVAC to our systems because some people just want a powerhouse. They want their house wasn't designed for solar. It's like, Scott, I can't fit 3 E-volts in here. I can't fit all these inverters you say I need. Great, let's build a powerhouse. And in that powerhouse, we'll take care of the temperature and the climate control, whether we need to heat or cool with a mini split that's on a critical loads panel in that powerhouse. And when we get into critical loads everywhere. We go to the house, like we're going to run your critical loads in the house. Oh, but I got a shop, I've got a barn, I've got animals, I got the powerhouse. And sometimes we end up splitting the power and going to 4 to 5 buildings on the property. And that's very doable if the person can manage and understand how much power they're using. They just want power to run that freezer that's in the other house, the other building. So yeah, temperature is very important, and it's not you can get a mini split for $1,000 that heats and cools in just about any county in the United States, and they're getting better and better in cold climates too, running they're running in Canada. And so yeah, we do a lot with that just to you want to keep your equipment nice. Just because it can run at 112 degrees doesn't mean you should run it at 112 degrees. A little bit of HVAC is good. It's creative ways to use HVAC. Put a heat pump water heater in the space where your batteries and your inverter are. And anytime you make hot water, it dehumidifies and cools that space. There's a lot that you can do in the beginning design work to make that equipment last forever.
That's fine, Scott. We're going to knock out 2 more questions here as we come up into our hour time frame. The one question I have, and it's a little bit for both me and Scott, is from Bob Mara. He's looking to build a home in New Hampshire where the cost to bring power is crazy, quote unquote. Can we build and have creature comforts off the grid, yet be protected from winter days where solar is just not enough to keep the batteries charged? Bob, there is consultation available. I think, I would connect with Scott and tell him a little bit more about your home, what you're looking to do. I mean, not what you're looking to do, obviously move off the grid, but how big is your home? What kind of loads do you have in your home? Scott, any other advice for people looking to build an off-grid system? What do they need to know to come back to you with? I think like their load profile, a proposed solar array, anything off the top of your head?
Yeah, location-wise, because we just finished a system in Maine, right on the Canadian border. We did one last year on the Canadian border in Vermont, so it would come that weather-wise that he's doing. So we can talk about that later. You can send me an email, we can go through it. But you should be able to do this off-grid. You don't need to bring power in. And those systems I'm talking about in Maine and in Vermont are totally off-grid, no power ever going to go in there. So it's very doable. You just got there's some creative ways in cold climate. It's been to me, I started designing for cold climates. I got some at Wyoming at 8,000 feet, Colorado at 9,000, the Vermont job, the Maine job. It's like, if I can get that where you have the creature comforts in those environments, I can do it anywhere. And there's things like the Cold Climate Institute in Alaska where they're growing food, and all the creature comforts that you want can be done with the technologies that are available today. You might not know that they exist. You've got people with heat pumps making their house at 70 degrees when it's 28 below zero with a heat pump. Okay, so, and that's running on electricity from a battery-based system, solar system. So there's a lot of building practices that help in all of this, of course, insulation and that kind of stuff. So it's very doable in New Hampshire. I know that.
And the last and final question here for the webinar is from Adam Keithan. Are you seeing any market for battery backup projects that are not time of use rate or off grid? One that comes to mind for me, Adam, is somewhere like Northern California, where you have all this inclement weather, and the need for backup, not even using it for time of use or moving completely off the grid, is essentially paramount. So that's what I've seen here, and I have a very specific experience with the West. That's one market that comes to mind for strictly backup projects. Scott, maybe you'd agree that another one might be Florida, since there are a lot of storms that come through and things like that, maybe on the East Coast. Any comment to that?
I've stayed out of Florida. Florida's hard if you're out of state to install solar in, from what I gather. So we've only had this, what I mentioned in my time of use slide before, is just that I don't have a lot of experience other than it is a great way to utilize the battery. And even if you don't live in a place that uses time of use rates, it's a feature that you can take advantage of today, and you're using your battery to do that. And so I can't, you speak more to the utility side of it than I would, Alex. So I don't think you're going to convince a utility of anything.
No. Well, I think most people, if they don't do it for backup or time use, they use it for self-use. So they'll actually get solar and battery and use the utility as a backup source instead of vice versa. And that's called a self-use application. It also can be used in areas where they're not allowing net metering at all. One that comes to mind is Hawaii. In Hawaii, there is no net metering. So any excess production made from your solar, any generation, if it's not going to the load, it's gone. So having a battery in self-use applications, if they're saying you're not allowed, capture all that extra energy, discharge it maybe at night, instead of just having all your excess energy just basically go away. So that could be something, that's another application on which you can use a battery too.
Okay.
Perfect, guys. So I want to, Scott, thank you again for jumping on this webinar here. I hope everybody found it very helpful and informative regarding, talking with Scott directly here, answering your questions. Now you'll see here, you have my direct email and my phone number, and the same thing over with the team at Practical Preppers. If you have any other questions, if you want to get in contact with Scott regarding your home project, shoot him over a quick email, let him know what you're looking to do, and let the best get to work. Other than that, I think we are good to go. Scott, do you have any closing notes here on your end?
No, I really appreciate the opportunity. It's great. Just work on that lead time, would you, Alex?
I'm working on it. You're gonna see me driving across the country delivering batteries by hand if I have to.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, again. Take care now.